Hey everybody, hope that you're doing well and having a great week. Brian Marvel here, and I'm so glad that you have stopped by to check out this video. Whether you found it on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or wherever you find your video content, I hope that you find it to be encouraging and helpful. So, I am a pastor, and as a pastor, one of the things that I regularly hear from people is that the Bible is intimidating. I think there's lots of people out there who have this desire to connect with God, and they believe that the Bible could actually help them connect with God, but they don't engage with the Bible because they're so overwhelmed and intimidated by it. Right? It's filled with all of these obscure stories, all of these weird names and terms that I can't pronounce or understand, and so instead of digging deeper into it, they just avoid it altogether. Well, my hope with this video and the ones to follow is that it gives you a few handles on how you can better understand the Bible, and would encourage you to dig into the scriptures so that you can not only understand them better, but also deepen your relationship with God. Now, when it comes to understanding the Bible, I think it's important to grasp what the Bible is in its essence, because I think lots of people assume that the Bible is just a big book filled with lists of rules and commands, and God is trying to control us with these commands and maybe even squash our joy through them. Now, there are directives, there are commands in the scriptures, there are things that we are called to do, certain ways that we are called to live, but at its essence, the Bible is not a book filled with rules. At its essence, I would suggest that the Bible is a story. It's a story about who God is and what He has done and what He is continuing to do in our world. And there's a literary term that helps us understand what kind of story it is. That term is a meta-narrative. The Bible is a meta-narrative. And what that means is a meta-narrative is simply an overarching large story that helps give a certain group of people understanding in their world and helps them structure belief. So in some ways it tells you where you've come from, what this life is all about, and where you're headed. The Bible is a meta-narrative. And the group of people that the Bible is seeking to serve is all of humankind. Because the Bible does tell us where we came from. It tells us what this life is all about, and it helps us understand where this life is headed. So the question that this raises, though, is if the Bible is a story, what is the plot line of this story? And I think there are 4 words that help us grasp what the Bible is all about. The first word is the word creation. The God of the Bible is a creator God. And this circle just represents the world that God created, because He created everything that we see: the stars, the moon, the sun, the sky, the birds, the plants, the beaches, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers, the streams, the things that we eat, fruits, vegetables, all of the animals. And in the first pages of Scripture, God is creating this world. He's proclaiming it good, and on the 6th day, He creates Adam and Eve, and He puts them in this garden, in His good world that He has created, and He calls them to partner with Him in stewarding and caring for the garden. But then, just a few chapters later, we find that Adam and Eve do the one thing that God tells them not to do. He says, you can eat of any tree in this garden but one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can't eat of that tree. Sure enough, Adam and Eve are deceived, and they do the one thing that God tells them not to do. And then what happens is what we call the fall. Sin enters the world, and God's good world is destroyed. And if this circle represents the world that God created, the fall breaks or fractures, distorts, it cracks God's good world. And the result is that death and destruction and despair enter into the world and permeate throughout the world. And this breaks God's heart. He is grieved over the destruction of the good world that He has created. But God, being the good God that He is, finds a way not to leave the world to suffer under its own consequences, but He finds a way to offer redemption to His world. The Bible is a story about redemption. God redeeming His good world that He created to the way that He intended it to be. And the way that He offers redemption is through His Son, Jesus Christ. He sends his Son as a way to fulfill everything that has happened in the story up to the point where he enters into the story, and through his sacrificial death and his resurrection, God begins to restore the world to the way that he intended it to be. He restores it back to the way that he longed for it to be. Now we're in the place of God offering redemption and starting the process of restoration, but as we look out into the world, it's very clear that this world is not operating without death, without destruction, without harm, without conflict. And so we find ourselves in this story. We find ourselves in the middle of God redeeming and restoring, and one day he will bring it all to its fruition, and we will find that his world will be put back together. So what is the Bible all about? It's a story of redemption. God rescuing, redeeming, and storing the good world that he created, that we get to be a part of, calling us to partner with him in the stewarding of the work that he is doing. So I hope this video has been just a little bit helpful in giving you some understanding of what the Bible is about. There'll be more videos coming to give further detail, but until then, keep reading, keep plugging away, keep engaging, find God in the scriptures, trusting that he wants to meet with you and tell you more about what he's doing in your life. Grace and peace to you. Have a great rest of the day.